as Donald Trump essentially abuses the powers of the executive branch and Republican majorities in Congress remain complacent and silent, honestly. More and more officials are looking to the courts to keep the president in check, especially in Colorado. The state's attorney general has been involved in about 9 lawsuits against the administration in just less than a month. These range from issues like gender-affirming care to DOJ's access to payment systems to medical research and more. So joining us now is Colorado's Attorney General Phil Weiser. Thank you, General Weiser, for being with us today.
Good to see you, General. I guess my question is, as I'm looking at all the cases kind of play themselves out, and we had Norm Eisen here, who's the tip of the spear on a number of these cases that are hitting the courts. Are we sort of deluding ourselves to think that these cases, that the courts will actually be that bulwark against what we see happening? Or is there some real valid expectation that the courts will hold the line against the assault on the Constitution, the halt on the civil liberties and rights of federal workers, et cetera?
Michael, I have hope for the courts, for the Constitution, and for our great democratic republic. The signs thus far are, I'll call it, mildly encouraging. We have this case, as you noted, where the so-called Department of Government Efficiency has had access to sensitive financial information, people's Social Security records, bank accounts, and it was done without the traditional safeguards and without oversight, so that we're not sure, even to this day, what happened to the data. We've got a court order in place, a preliminary injunction that bars the DOJ officials from accessing this data, and the Justice Department has indicated compliance with that. We had another case involving the funding cuts that were done unilaterally without legal authority. We went to court. We got another order saying you can't cut unilateral funding programs for Meals on Wheels or for victims of domestic violence or drug task forces and more. There's indications those orders are being followed. And then as for what the courts will do, take the case of birthright citizenship, which is plain in the 14th Amendment. The courts that have looked at it have all said this is a fairly clear case, and they've stopped it from going into effect. I believe the Supreme Court will reach that conclusion. I recognize that we do have statements from the president and the vice president that are discouraging, and there may be a moment of truth that will test whether or not we have a republic under the rule of law. We're going to keep fighting for the rule of law and the people of the United States of America.
One of the reasons I think that the work that the AGs are doing is so important is because you are making an administrative argument, right? So on something like birthright citizenship, you are saying, how do you expect us to do this? What does this actually look like should it come to fruition? I just wonder how many of the policies and ideas that they are floating you look at and say, doesn't even work in theory, but tell me how it would operate in practice.
What's interesting about this is the law that we're using in a few of these cases. One of the cases you mentioned before, the cuts to medical funding, NIH funding, is a law called the Administrative Procedure Act. It was passed with great Republican support after the concern was that Franklin Delano Roosevelt had acted without oversight by the courts and without enough of a check on executive power. That law has a very basic idea, which you just got to. If you're taking an administrative action, you have to think about it first. You have to make sure it's not arbitrary and capricious, in the words of the law. When they decide over a weekend to make massive cuts in funding for breakthrough research, I'm here in Colorado, University of Colorado, Colorado State, this would have been a $90 million cut overnight, would have cost people jobs, undermined basic research, and it was going to be incredibly disruptive with no notice, no chance for people to say, wait a minute, have you thought about this? That's not the way our system works. And that's why that action was stopped as illegal.
So I think it's important to note, because it has been in the press as of late, the Democratic attorney generals are very clearly coming together to defend what you all have noted are the constitutional rights of the people with whom you represent, whom elected you all. And then the governors are in an interesting space because they are, in some ways, triangulating. You've got some governors across the country, Democrats, who are very clearly like, the president is not going to infringe on, tell us what to do, very public the pushback from the governor of Maine this week, Janet Mills, directly being challenged by the president in a meeting because the National Governors Association is in town. And then you have your governor, Jared Polis, who has struck a tone that is kind of conciliatory towards Trump and Elon Musk and many of the actions that have been taken. He's been very public that he supports the HHS secretary that Donald Trump appointed, RFK Jr. There is a Colorado Newsline op-ed just this week by a person, Quentin Young, and it notes Colorado, of course, must continue to work with federal agencies on highway funding, higher education, and many other routine or administrative matters. What's objectionable is Polis's public and unnecessary concessions to Trump. Whatever immediate advantages he might earn for the state through such posturing is far outweighed by the damage Trumpism is certain to inflict. Is there any tension, if you will, between the actions that you have taken as an attorney general, joining with other attorney generals across the country, and some of the things that the governor is saying and he is willing to do in working with the Trump administration?
I'd make a couple of critical points. First, attorneys general in Colorado and most states are elected separately from the governor. So the governor has his lane, I've got mine. I make sure to look very closely at these actions and ask a basic question. Are they legal, and do they harm the citizens of Colorado? And if an action is illegal and harms citizens in Colorado, my job is very clear. I need to protect citizens of Colorado. I need to defend the rule of law. And whoever in the Trump administration is going to cross that line, they are going to see us in court. There are going to be times, and I look forward to these times, when I can work with the Trump administration on issues around protecting consumers or how we protect our land, air, and water, or public safety. What I will make sure I continue to do is look at every action, clear-eyed, and ask those two basic questions, and Governor Polis will have to decide how he approaches his job.
We'll leave it there. Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser, thank you for your time this morning.